Let's see, this way. Okay. So, well, thank you for attending this presentation. Thank you to the organizers for having me. It's been a great event so far. My name is Cesare, and I'm gonna talk about shoes today. No, just kidding. I'm a designer and a developer. I'm building one product which is called Pod Rover. Anybody's running a podcast in the audience? Nobody? Shame on you, go home and tomorrow come up with a new podcast. The world needs new podcasts. Anyway, Pod Rover monitors iTunes reviews of your podcast and notifies you of new ones if you like to check it out. But who are you? So, how many web developers? Nobody. Okay, somebody. Good. How many? What's wrong? Don't know. Should I go on? The timer says 0, so I've managed to steal like 5 minutes now. Okay, good. So, how many mobile developers? Android, iOS? Nobody. Okay. So, just web developers, 50%, and the rest are golfers? Just taking a rest? Okay, good. No worries. So, when you have to design a product, you start more or less like this. So with a blank canvas, which can be scary, much like a blank page for a writer, for example. And in front of this, what do? You have a bunch of options. You follow your inspiration. Today I feel pink, so my user interface will be pink. Or you follow your guts, so your instincts. You can take advantage of guidance. For example, Apple and Google provide human interface guidelines, so you can read them. They're pretty long, but they are interesting, so take a look at that. I wish there was a version for the web. I wish. Or you can follow the trends. So nowadays everything is flat. You go to Dribble, you find some inspiration, and you start from there. Or you put the user in the middle. And I just did a mistake because I said user. And I think we all, so me included, should start thinking and calling them customers. Even if our product is free, still we have the responsibility of building the product, and so they are customers. Even if you're talking about an open source project, for example. So you put your customer in the middle. You adopt what's called the user-centric approach. Or, in front of the black canvas, you call, it's a horrible word, but I'm going to say it anyway. You call the marketing manager. Is there a marketing manager in the audience? Don't be shy. Don't be shy, come on. Nobody? Anyway, I'm gonna say, at the beginning I'm gonna say you are bad people, and then in the end, you're gonna be good people, okay? But yeah, the marketing manager, the genius. And I like to think of the marketing manager as Winston Wolfe. So if you've seen Pulp Fiction, Winston Wolfe, the line, I solve problems, is pretty famous. I'm Winston Wolfe, I solve problems. Or the marketing manager says, I know people. I know what they think. I know what they want. And so I can design a product. So, one of the words that a marketing manager can say is this one, pretty complicated, empathy. So, the capability of somebody to put themselves in someone else's shoes. Okay? Now, just this year, a few months ago, the Imperial College in London ran an experiment. Interesting, very interesting. So they called a group of marketing managers. They split them in 2 different groups. And here comes the interesting part. To the first group, they asked, behave as normal. And this is usually called, in experiments, is usually called the control group. To the second group, the second group was primed about the customer. So, was told, okay, this is our typical customer, this is what he or she feels and thinks, and you should put yourself in that shoes. And both groups then were asked to forecast the reaction of customers in front of a new product. The interesting part is the result, as usual. So, both groups have been asked, hey, now come up with a hypothetical reaction to a new product. The second group, which was supposed to be in the customer's shoes, so know the customer better, and then come up with a bunch of reactions that were similar to the target user, got more egocentric. They projected themselves, they projected their customer identities on the hypothetical customer. And so when they were asked, imagine you enter a Starbucks and you're thirsty, what do you buy, blah, 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 and that kind of stuff, they reacted as themselves and not as the hypothetical customer. So empathy, which is such a cool word, yes, which is such a cool word, can backfire. Managers are themselves people, and so are also customers, consumers. And so they projected their identity, consumer's identity on the hypothetical customer. By the way, this is the link to that study. Unfortunately, it's behind a paywall. It's kind of not that expensive, and it's interesting. The slides will be online, so no need to take pictures. But yeah, as I said, empathy can backfire. And how do you prevent that? Well, who's this guy, first of all? Correct, Warren Buffett. He, in 2008, was the richest man on the planet. In 2015, he's just the 3rd richest man on the planet. So, but he's an investor, and when he is in front of the question, should I invest in this venture or not? What does he do? He calls a meeting. And who attends the meeting? People with different and often opposite opinions. So, and that's the same that should happen, and sometimes happens, I would say 50% of the times, in agencies. So you do not call one marketing manager. You put people with different opinions in the room. And so after the meeting, then you have the general overview. Then you have the right view of that market segment. So Warren Buffett, the Warren Buffett strategy, or if you're not Warren Buffett, well, it's also good to talk to your customers. And I said talk, not sell. So talk to your customers about their problems, the problems they are facing in their day-to-day lives. I don't remember who said that, because I heard it 20,000 times, and it's kind of hard to remember the original author. But he or she said, love the problem, not the solution. Get in love with the problem that you're trying to solve and not the solution. And this is important, because otherwise you're selling. So you're calling a customer and say, this product is this, this, and that. And the customer might say, who cares? Because those are not my real problems. Now, during a conversation with your customer, he or she might not tell you everything or what you need to know. And so the other technique is observe. Observe how your customer behaves in a real setting. If we are, and you can also observe online, as an example, go to a PHP forum, read all the posts. If you find people complaining about one topic, write a book about that topic. Yes, that's a marketing technique already unfolded, I would say. I mean, you don't need, and people will buy it unless it's something, I don't know, that dates back 10 years ago or something. But otherwise, they will buy it because that's a problem. So observe. You can observe also online, not necessarily just offline. A third approach is the one I call cognitive science. So in general, we as human beings have some features that are shared across cultures and religions and so on. It's complicated. Perception, representation, navigation, problem solving, language parsing, language processing. It's a very complicated research field, I would say theoretical field. But a very interesting quote by Edward Tufte, one of the gurus of information visualization, says, "It is worthwhile to understand universal cognitive tasks in order to design our displays in accord with those tasks." So, yes, you have talked to the customer, you have observed the customer, but there's still something in the nature of the problem or the task itself that is relevant, that might be relevant when you go to design your solution. Fortunately, cognitive science is super abstract, and theories and hypotheses and stuff like that. Fortunately, there's human-computer interaction, which is the applied branch of cognitive science. It studies many aspects. The most relevant probably is, in this setting, is turn taking. I'm talking to you, you're listening, somebody is nodding, somebody is yawning, somebody is checking the email, no problem. But and so it looks like a passive setting in which I give you information, and if you want, you receive it. But still, there's a loop between us, so you're giving me feedback. Whereas in a conversation, the loop is way more evident, because I say something, and then you receive that, you process that, and then you say something, and that's an input to me, and so on and so forth. Pretty much the same with user interfaces. I mean, I open a search form, I type in something, that's an input to the machine shows a spinner that says wait a bit, and then after a spinner, hopefully you see the results of your search. So that's also a dialogue. And there's a research field called human-computer interaction studying that. The key part of this is perception. How do human beings perceive? By doing laundry, essentially. So you're in front of this, that's clean, no worries. So you pick up a t-shirt, you fold it, you put it in a pile, and then you pick up undies, and then you fold them and you put it in a pile. You have different piles because they go in different piles when you put them in your drawers. So the laundry is an input. The temporary piles that I make, that's our temporary memory, our short-term memory, and then the drawer is our long-term memory. It's impossible to not mention the Gestalt that started all this movement about let's get to know how people think and englobe and process information. But the Gestalt is something that started 115 years ago, so that's pretty old, and that's theoretical. They started by saying, okay, the visual perception, so one of the 5 senses that we have available is something, the retina gets a stimulus, and somehow something happens in the mind. And that's a very simple, simplistic, I would say, way of modeling how we know the world surrounding us. Because perception, as I explained before, essentially does not begin with a kind of loop. Neisser's in the 1970s came up with this model, which is way more interesting when it comes to modeling knowledge. There's the environment, there's knowledge, and there's exploration. Now, the environment modifies my knowledge of the world. My knowledge guides my exploration, and my exploration samples the environment. On and on and on and on, since the very first second we were born. Viscerally, rationally, whatever perspective you want to take, there's this loop constantly going on. So perception is not just something invented, I would say, but it's a loop. It's a wild truth. And it's very selective. For example, during conferences, the real conference does not happen here. This is just an excuse for people to meet up. But the real conference is happening in the lobby where people, team up serendipitously, I would say, in small groups and chat. What do you do? Did you try Angular 2.0? And so on and so forth. That's a real conversation. When you're part of a small group conversation like that, you're totally able to ignore any other conversation going on nearby. Okay? And that's because your perception is highly selective. You wouldn't have the computational power, I would say, to process all the other conversation going on nearby. It's pretty clear that in this loop, we are the knowledge node. So what's in the knowledge node? Unfortunately, the literature is very complicated across the 70s and the 80s. Somebody came up with terms like frames or schemas. I'm going to go with schemas in this case, but what's a schema? Well, it's more like scaffold on which you hang up your bits of information. It's the way you organize. It's the way you lay out your socks and t-shirts in the drawer. And this metaphor also allows me to explain very simply what's the difference between a beginner and an expert. I mean, the beginner simply has a smaller scaffold that's going to grow over time. So, when, of course, this is a system, it's a limited system, and so we should talk about what happens when we overload the system. Okay, when you overload the server, it crashes, it restarts. If you're lucky, it does not lose any data, lucky you. But in the case of human systems, we talk about cognitive load. So, cognitive load happens pretty much every day. Maybe we do not identify it immediately, but it happens. And usually the side effect of that is that we are stressed, or we scream, or we are impatient, or something like that. Because we are hogging our working memory that I've mentioned before. Now, our working memory is something very simple to describe. 4 to 5 bits of information that lasts 10 seconds. That's it. And it's a miracle that we do what we do every day with this RAM, essentially. I couldn't come up with a better metaphor than sax parsing. Have you ever had to do some sax parsing in the past? My condolences, because it's not that easy, but it's easy on memory. So depending on the level of nesting of your document, you can get away with way memory usage if you adopt a sax parsing approach as opposed to a DOM parsing approach. And that's how our memory works. So I'm not interested in this line, ignore. This is interesting, so let's put it in some buffer for a second and then move on to the next one, and so on and so forth. So when we hog the memory, we have too much big XML document to parse, essentially. Or in real life, go back to the time when you were trying to learn driving a car to get your driving license. I mean, you had this new thing there, the wheel, gears, clutch, gas, brakes. How do I approach this? And that was just one part. Then you had to check the road, and then probably you had somebody on your side, like your parents or your bigger sibling, yelling at you because you're doing it wrong. Okay, so that's a lot to process at once. And is somebody crossing the road? And how's the traffic light? Is it red or green? I don't know. So you had a lot going on. But you've managed to get a driving license, okay? So you have learned that. It is something that you learn, and how do you learn it? By not using your working memory, your very short working memory. You learn recipes, schemas, to deal with recurring situations in your life. And now, probably an experienced driver, you do not need to think, okay, when should I change gear? Or is it red or green? I didn't check the light. Now, when you drive, you can reply to text messages, you can sing, you can talk to people, you can do a lot of things, okay? And that's one way to deal with cognitive overload. So we learn recipes, we put them in the long-term storage, and we reuse those recipes whenever we need them. Or, another technique is breaking it down in small pieces. This is a pretty common suggestion for whoever wants to learn programming, for example, or any other activity. Break it down in small pieces. Have you ever wondered why a credit card number is made of 4 digits, 4 groups, and each group is made of 4 digits? Because when you have to copy that number to a form online or paper form, it's easier to move 4 numbers at a time instead of a whole 16-digit long number. And yet, we managed to make some mistake, right? So this is the power of chunking, the power of breaking it down in smaller steps, which are more digestible for us. Try to remember this number. I'm going to give you 5 seconds. Okay, it was unfair. I didn't warn you. But there's people that are able to do this. Not the usual CIA spy and in the American movie. Also that. But the point is, if you break it down this way, if you find the key to represent that number, now you just need to remember the key, and that's it. You don't need to remember the number. And it's also a technique to remember the PIN number of your credit card and stuff like that. How many of you have set a PIN, which is, the date of your marriage or the date of your firstborn daughter or son? That's a key. Anyway, let's move to white space. That's another technique, especially in user interfaces, also in general for artists or architects that are trying to lay out a space. How do you use white space? Don't give me the I am a coder, I don't care kind of speech, because you do it every single day. Every single day, you organize your code in a way that is readable. This is great usage of white space. And yet, we manage to argue what's the right way of formatting code. Okay? But yeah, everybody uses and is perfectly able to use white space. This is the Mail app. If you use Android, you probably have a similar layout. This is so well white space organized that you can get rid of the lines. Of course, you cannot see them because there's the seam between the two screens. But if you delete the lines between the messages, it's still super clear what's the border between one message and the other. And white space is also a marketing, let's go back for a second to the marketing manager, a marketing tool. So you buy a phone like this. I believe Android is more or less the same layout. Well, it depends on which flavor of UI. But why there are holes in here doesn't make any sense. Apple is so perfect and squared and everything is symmetric. How do you fill those holes? By buying applications on the store. So, because our brain is so trained to do some what's called gap filling that, I mean, it's kind of automatic. Now, let's talk about layout for a second. This is not just a very nice showcase of, I believe, Gucci, but I don't remember. I'm not a Target customer, but when I see this showcase, it's immediately clear what I should expect if I ever step into that shop, okay? So, it is clear also that, try to remember the shop, it is also clear that they're not just selling those items, but it's clear the philosophy, I would say, of the shop itself. As opposed to this. This is a showcase of a bazaar, I believe in Hong Kong, but I don't remember. I took this picture because I wanted, when I said, okay, when I'm back home, I want to try to find out what they are selling. I think there's not even a name to describe this kind of shop, okay? Because usually, well, okay, sometimes we walk some boulevard and we look around and we might stop on a shop and buy something. Some other time, we are more driven. So, I need a needle or I need a new zip for my jeans. So, in front of this, I don't know the answer. So, do they sell a needle? I don't know. So, as you can see, the difference is pretty clear. Whereas here, clearly, they're not selling a needle. Okay? And this is so common in user interfaces. Now, I didn't want to pick any modern application because, I mean, maybe it was made by some indie developer, and I do not want to pick on indie developers. So I went back in time. So this is Windows 95. This is the result. This is an application meant to rename files. So the task is renaming files. That's it. Okay? So it's not some, invoice organizer, scheduler, and stuff like that. This is what happens when there's no designer, or when the designer or the design group team does not want to make a decision on behalf of the user. 80% of the times, the task of design team is making the right decision for the user, is hiding the right details and showing just what's relevant for the task at hand. How do you do that? Well, you exploit two, for sure, key properties. One is color and the other is shape. For example, the color. This I mean, the color is a visually selective variable. So that's your reaction when I say to you, visually selective variable, unless you're a designer. But what happens? Well, let's run a quick experiment. This is a slide, okay? I'd like you to count how many red letters are there? Shout it out loud. 8. Okay. 3 seconds, let's say. Fine. Now, same slide, so you are familiar with that. How many times do you see the letter E? 8. Somebody said 8 after somebody else said a lot of rambling going on, okay? But it took you more than twice to count by shape. So in front of this, counting by color is way easy. That's why color is a visually selective variable, whereas shape is not. So if you want to say to your customer, hey, these two things on the UI are different, first use color. I mean, if you want to be explicit, use color. And you can couple also color with shape. We'll see that in a second. But for example, this is a tab bar for iOS. The same is for Android or any other tab bar, even browser tab bars. So we might argue that the difference sometimes is not evident. Maybe on very high sunlight, it's kind of difficult to recognize what's the selected state and what's not. But still, you see the principle applied. So they tried to highlight, using color, they tried to highlight 2 different states. And shape. So, recycle bins, cool, industrial design, very nice. If I were a mayor of a city, I would probably say yes. If I were a citizen, I have a piece of paper. Where do I put it? I have no idea. You can put labels. Paper, glass, blah, blah, blah. If you put labels, that's fine, but we go back to the shape parsing scenario. You do not understand. These are just blueprints, but there are real implementations in real life. Recycle bins like this. It's not perfect. It's not as clean as the other one. It's not as cool as the other one. But I walk with my newspaper. I'm done with it. I've been at the park. I'm done. I've read it. I gotta throw it away. I walk by. Immediately, I put it in blue one. I do not need to think. We still have to solve this problem. This is, again, a sort of ambiguity. But we have solved the paper problem. So you see how you can couple color with shape. Now, you want to design shakers. Again, gorgeous. Look, maybe you didn't notice, so let me just sell it to you. The shape of the holes, this is an S to say salt, and this is a P to say pepper. Okay? And there's also a little difference here. This is white and this is black, also to highlight the difference. And you need those, otherwise you do not know what's in there. Well, we'll get there. But first, you have introduced, how do you say pepper in Ukrainian? So it starts with a P. How do you say salt? Okay, sorry about that. I'm sure there's a language in which salt does not start with an S. I'm sure. So you have created a localization problem, first of all, which might be partially solved by the color. at the bottom. There's also a nicer version, but it still suffers of the same problem. Okay, Q design. Let me tell you about the problem. You are a waiter or a waitress at a restaurant. You are done, everything is clean. The boss, it's 11:30. Maybe you want to still go out with your friends, and your boss says, we should check the shakers and fill those that are empty. Welcome. You got to check them all, one by one, because you don't know. There's also a version for geeks, but still exactly the same problem. So, this is boring. This is classic. This, you don't like it, but it solves any problem of every potential user, I would say in this case, of this tool. Okay? You still can go out with your friends at 11:30 because it's easy to find out which shakers you should refill. In case of new interfaces, and nowadays, let's not talk about us because we are used to computers and new applications, new layouts, and stuff like that. But in case of, think of your parents or grandparents using new tools like those that we built, the first impression counts a lot. I believe you're familiar with the scene in which you buy a new phone to somebody and after 2 minutes they say, no, this is not for me. It's not for me. I mean, I cannot manage to, touch it, not even touch it. 10 years ago, there was a pretty, this was a hit, Blink. The moral of the book was people, when they are in front of a new situation or a new tool or a new person, in the first 30 seconds, they quickly come up with an impression. Might be wrong, or even totally wrong, but we need to get familiar quickly with something unfamiliar. Okay, so in 30 seconds, I come up with a judgment, essentially, about you, which might be wrong. But to discover that it's wrong, I need time. I need to get to I need to get to know you more. Okay, to spend more time with you, interact with you. Okay. With tools, it's pretty much the same. With applications, with software, it's pretty much the same. Sometimes we need time to get acquainted with that. Anyway, for example, this is an application of mine. It's not on the store anymore, and I'm totally fine by saying that this is wrong. Okay? This is a weather application. You open the application, and you end up in this screen. What can you do? You don't know? There's a pretty cool slide down gesture-driven effect if you scroll down, but nobody tells you. So many times you are every part of you is involved in that. And so you miss the stop, and then you have to walk back. You miss the train, and so on. You miss the exit on the highway because you were talking to the phone, or you were thinking, maybe I should do that or this, or what if, or maybe you were thinking back to a vacation or something some warm thought from the past. Either way, that activity is so important that you are essentially not there. So if I talk to you, you are in a state of trance. What did you say? Sorry. Something like that. And another important aspect is habit, which is kind of related to flow, but not necessarily, because flow happens and that's it. And you realize it at the end. So it's 5 already? I didn't realize. I can speak for 3 hours if I don't check that timer, for example. So, That's one part. The counterpart that goes sort of hand in hand is habit. So the fact that I have particular gestures on the stage, for example, the fact that you wake up in the morning and you need to shower, because if you do not shower, you do not start your day the right way. Shower, take coffee, wash your teeth, whatever. The point is, we are so familiar with that habit, with that script, that we realize that when we do not do it. So I am at a conference, I wake up in a different room, my phone is not to my right as usual, or my shoes are not in the same place, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's the power, that's the habit, and the great part about habits, there are good and wrong habits, smoking, for example. The point is, they're not set in stone. You can change habits. You yourself, you can decide, okay, I'm going to start drinking a glass of water every morning when I wake up. I do it. It's 3 months that I do it, and I'm kind of happy about it. Okay, it's totally irrelevant. Maybe it's healthy. I don't know. I didn't think about that. Oh my goodness! What I wanted to do is explore how you can build an habit. Okay, and it takes 2 to 3 months. There are 3 parts: a cue, so a trigger. The fact that I wake up, okay, so wake up scenario, wake up, what should I do? Phone to the right, or the shower's over there, the shoes are there. So that's the cue. So the fact that triggers, sometimes it's called trigger. And then there's the routine. So what's associated to the trigger? There are songs that when you listen to them, bring you back 30 years, and that's the cue. I mean, so you immediately make that association. Okay, maybe it's an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend, and you go back to that scene. You don't like it, but still, you cannot avoid that association, and that's so tight. So there's a trigger that triggers a routine. Wake up, wash your teeth. And finally, there's a reward. So what I get back from this routine that I did: whiter teeth, healthier lungs if I quit smoking, and so on. And again, this is a loop. So the guy, now I don't remember his name at the moment, managed in the 1930 or something, to convince all the population, all of the American population, to wash their teeth. And he exploited exactly this 1, 2, 3 schema: cue, trigger, and reward. Okay, so he pushed the schema. He didn't push a product. He also was very heavy on the cue. So you wake up in the morning, immediately you go to the restroom and wash your teeth. You feel something more fresh, you feel better, and then finally after a few months you have whiter teeth. There's a pretty interesting book about habit, not this one, written by Hooked, co-authored by Ryan Hoover, which is the guy behind Product Hunt. Maybe you're familiar with that. There's people religiously waking up in the morning and checking Product Hunt. What's the hottest startup or tool or open source library or podcast or bug today? Okay? They managed to build a habit out of this. So if you can do that with your product, if your product is your go-to, is your trigger for something, I mean, you nailed it. Because people, say, okay, and this is association, we see it. I mean, I gotta book a vacation. I'm sure you have some preferred website to visit when you have to do that, okay? Maybe you don't like it, but you check it out anyway because you want to, because that's kind of automatic, I would say. There are other books related to the subjects that I have mentioned. So these are classics. I mean, these are the Hemingway classics of user interface design. Universal principles of design, designed for use, and don't make me think. Which is old, but still very, very actual. So building a successful app, product, service is building this loop, this perceptual loop. This, okay, I have a need and I know where to go. This association. And that has nothing to do with the programming language, with the time you spend on the programming language and on coding, on the design and stuff like that. That has to do with people. So with studying how people behave, studying your customers, what are their needs, and so on and so forth. But you know that perfection is this magic place somewhere that you never get to. You walk towards that, but you never get there. So probably more than books, presentations at conferences, more than tutorials, more than competence, what you need is just practice, because practice makes perfect. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Cesare. Audience, do you have any questions to our speaker? No questions.
I was so clear that there are no questions.
Well, thank you, Dan. It was Dan.
Anyway, I'm around, I'm available, so let this gentleman ask a question.
Yeah, I have a question for us that are really new to actually doing design. So I do a lot of hardware programming and that stuff, but commonly now we actually have to do some user interface design and stuff like that. Like, where would we start? What's the first step to actually get into understanding this?
Do not call a marketing manager. Well, the question is, where do we start? You can, my personal preference is go with the wind, go with your guts. So I have never been a sales guy. I've never sold stuff, and now I'm selling a service. So I learned how to sell, okay? And of course, you can find your preferred book, or your preferred author, or your preferred mastermind group that helps you with that. And go with the wind. Go with what you have and use that. The other strategy that I would adopt is, again, who am I building this for? So, who's my customer? Who's going to buy this? I see a lot of times, and I've been also involved in this kind of situation, you build something and nobody buys it. And it's not because you're bad at marketing, or you do not know somebody writing for TechCrunch. The point is, it does not solve a problem, an actual problem. And sometimes it happens also when you build something that scratches your own itch. Sometimes. Some other times, scratching your personal itch. So I have a problem, like I don't understand this API, so I'm going to write a short ebook about that. And then you have this content that you can sell. If that's a common enough problem, then you're done, okay? But it's very likely that if you do not understand that API, and there's no other book or tutorial or blog post about it, then, I mean, there's a need in the market. And the same here. With hardware is even worse, I suspect, because, you know, with hardware you have you can have more expenses. So before buying what you need to buy to build your product, probably you can do some simulation, for example, on paper. You can simulate the behavior of a user interface using paper. You just need to cut and paste this sheets on a phone and then guide your customer through the phone. So you can gain some insight about that just by doing this, which is a very lo-fi kind of experiment, and it's also very cheap. You do not need a lot of stuff.
The application where you have to slide down, for example, the map. I mean, if we look at the smartphone development, a lot of companies tried it before Apple. And Apple actually created these simple gestures that kind of work. What do you think? Why they came up with that, and why all the others failed before?
Thank you for this question. Did you get the question? Should I repeat it? Okay. This is relevant, especially if you've seen the keynote on Wednesday. So on Wednesday, Apple announced an alternative way of interacting with the phone. Okay, so now there's a gesture. If you're not an iPhone user, there's a gesture in which you can swipe anywhere, and it does something like delete an email message or a text message. Say that you are in a screen and there's a previous screen. Okay, you can tap the back button or you can swipe from the edge. Okay, so if you start swiping from the edge, you go back to the previous screen of the same application. Okay, bear with me. With the new technology announced on Wednesday, if you press, so 3D press, and then swipe back, you go to the previously opened application. Now, you see where this is going? Give this kind of phone to your grandmother, and how much should they press, for how long, and so on and so forth. This is called gesture overloading, of course, and it's a problem. I say I've never touched a new phone. I don't know how to use it, but the only way I would justify that is that you do not have to use it. So if you do not know it's there, you do not use it, you keep on using your back button, and that's fine. The problem with my interface that's not displayed anymore was that everything was flat, and so you couldn't recognize buttons. Not necessarily buttons, but any interactive part. So that's the problem. You're just dumped there, and we are more or less in the driving license kind of situation. What do? I'm not gonna trigger a nuclear weapon somewhere if I swipe down, but somebody is still kind of overwhelmed by this situation. It does not act. I mean, it's just stuck.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cesare.